Welcome to my channel. I'm Nancy Thompson, your storyteller of American folklore, thrilling mysteries, and more. Join me for today's tale, a story of family, struggle, and resilience set in the heart of the USA. Today's story begins with Joe, a high school kid from a small fading town. "Here we are, Jason," Joe said as he stepped off the school bus. "This place is really falling apart." The old neighborhood stretched out before him, once proud, now crumbling. It's true what they say, even a dying camel's bigger than a horse. The tall brick apartment buildings, handed down from his ancestors, still stood though barely. They were relics of better days, but for Joe's family, survival was a daily grind. The Thompson family had no way to keep going like this. All Joe could hope for was to make a name for himself at Lincoln High, maybe bring back some of that old family glory. Joe Thompson, king of the hill, he'd dream. This year his grandma, the tough old matriarch everyone called Granny T, was running the show at home. She decided it was time to set Joe up with a wife. Not long after the wedding bells rang, trouble brewed. Joe's new wife, Tracy, started acting up. Turns out she was pregnant. One morning, Joe whipped up a bowl of oatmeal with bacon bits for her. Tracy took 2 bites and gagged, unable to keep it down. Granny T, wise from years of experience, was right there. "Quick, girls," she barked at the maids, "get her inside, don't let her catch a chill." Joe froze for a second, then snapped into action. "Call the guests and get Dr. Larson here," he shouted, rushing around like a headless chicken. Tracy was his world now, and he wasn't taking chances. Dr. Larson arrived, a wiry guy with a beard that screamed small-town wisdom. Joe hovered nearby, anxious. "Doc, that's my wife, how's she doing?" The doctor stayed quiet for a while, feeling Tracy's pulse. Joe blurted, "Well? What's up, Doc?" Dr. Larson stroked his beard, thoughtful. "Her pulse is uneven, strong 1 minute, weak the next. I'd say it's a boy, judging by the rhythm. But it's a bit erratic, more than usual." Joe's face lit up. "Assons." But Dr. Larson tempered the joy. "The irregularities, a concern. Could mean she's not stable." "What do we do about that, Doc?" Joe pressed. "It's not a big deal," Larson replied. "She's just frail, needs extra care. Keep her healthy, and she'll pull through." Joe nodded, relieved. After sending the doc off with a tip from the butler, he assigned 2 extra maids to Tracy's side. Forget the buddies waiting for him at the bar, he was all in for his wife now. Though their marriage was arranged by the gossip-loving folks in town, Joe and Tracy had grown tight. She had a knack for poetry and music, a taste that made Joe feel like he'd met her too late in life. The Thompsons had a history, 3 generations of only sons, each born late in life. Tracy, married into the family less than a year, was already expecting. Granny T couldn't stop grinning. A baby meant the Thompson bloodline would carry on, and she doted on Tracy like she was gold. Maybe, just maybe, Tracy'd give them a few more kids down the road. Time flew by. 9 months later, no one saw it coming. Tracy's delivery went sideways. She started bleeding hard during labor, non-stop. The midwives panicked, their hands shaking. Granny T bolted out of the birthing room, pale as a ghost, and found Joe pacing outside. "Joe, honey, it's bad," she gasped. "The baby's turned wrong, it won't come out. I don't know what to do." Joe's heart sank. Granny T nearly fainted beside him. But Joe kept his cool. "Round up every midwife in town, anyone who can help," he ordered the staff. A few midwives trickled in, but they hesitated, too scared to act. Joe was at his wits' end. Then a woman piped up, "Sir, there's old Maggie, she's the best we've got. Been doing this forever. If anyone can save them, it's her. But you've gotta hurry." Joe didn't blink. "Get her here, pay whatever it takes." After about 15 minutes, Maggie shuffled in with some helpers, rushing to the Thompson house. "Stay out," she snapped at the crowd as she barged in. "Joe, get me hot water, lots of it." Joe nodded, barking orders. The house turned into a whirlwind, staff scrambling, water boiling. Maggie hadn't been inside long when the door creaked open again. Her face was grim. "Joe, it's too late. We can only save the baby now." Joe's knees buckled. He grabbed Maggie's arm. "Do whatever you can, please." Maggie sighed, turned back, and with Granny T's help, got to work. Tracy, barely hanging on, delivered the baby, a boy. But the effort broke her. A few days later, she was gone. The kid was tiny, frail. With Tracy gone, Joe had to wean him off breast milk fast. Goat's milk became the lifeline, fed by the maids. Joe was gutted, burying his wife while tending to the newborn. He and Tracy had been soulmates, and losing her hit him hard. One night, drowning his sorrows at a bar with buddies, Joe poured shot after shot. Tears welled up as he turned to his pal Tom. "It's my fault, man. I didn't take good enough care of her. I'd rather die than live like this." Tom shook his head. "Life's got its own rules, Joe. Ain't your fault. You've got a son now, Tracy's legacy. You gotta step up for him. She'd want that." Joe sighed, staring into his glass. "He's so weak, Tom. The goat milk, he chokes half of it back up. Barely hangs on with some rice soup. I don't know what to do." Another shot went down, burning his throat. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the next part. Joe's search for a nanny, the introduction of a new character, and the unfolding family drama, or if you want adjustments to this section before moving forward. Joe had scoured the town for a wet nurse, but no luck. It was strange. Every woman with milk had her own kids to feed, and none could spare a drop. Finding the right nanny wasn't just about milk, though. For a family like the Thompsons, it was a big deal, someone trustworthy, reliable, almost like a second mom. Joe had planned to set Tracy up with one before the baby came, but her death came too fast. Now he was stuck, desperate. One of Joe's drinking buddies, Mike, leaned over the bar table. "Joe, it ain't that hard. Look over there." He pointed to a woman across the street, selling wild berries from a beat-up stand. She had a kid strapped to her back, proof she could nurse. "Ask her," Mike urged. Joe squinted. She wasn't much to look at, but something clicked. The other guys laughed. "Come on, Mike," one said. "Joe's not some nobody. He's a Thompson. Even if he's struggling now, he'll find someone better later. That lady's rough, might scare the kid." True enough, the woman, Lena Carter, had a rugged look. A big birthmark splashed across her face, enough to make folks flinch. But Tom piped up, "Wait, ain't that Lena Carter? Word is her husband died last week. Fell off a ladder fixing a roof. She's out here hustling to survive. Gotta respect that." Joe's ears perked up. Lena Carter. He knew her, or at least her husband, Dan. Years back, Joe and some pals got lost hiking in the woods near town. A pack of coyotes had them spooked, and Joe split off, running blind. Dan Carter, out chopping wood, found him, scared half to death, and got him out safe. Turned out Dan rented a patch of land from the Thompsons. Joe didn't even know until later, but after that, he'd swing by their place with groceries or cash, repaying the favor. Lena's life had been rough, and Joe had tried to ease it when he could, waiving rent, dropping off supplies. But with all the chaos at home, he'd missed the news of Dan's death. Now, seeing Lena out there, scraping by, an idea hit him. He excused himself from the bar, downed his last shot, and crossed the street. If he could trust anyone, it was her. Looks didn't matter, keeping his son alive did. And Joe wasn't about to skimp on paying her fare, either. He strode up to her stand, pulling a crisp 20 from his pocket. "Lena, hey. I need your help this time." Lena looked up, startled. "Joe Thompson? What are you doing here? This'll be the death of me, you showing up like this." She half laughed, half panicked, brushing dirt off her hands. Joe hesitated, then bit the bullet. It wasn't easy asking, but he laid it out. Tracy's death, the baby's struggle, all of it. Lena's eyes softened. "Oh, I thought it was something else. If your little guy needs feeding, Joe, just say it. You've helped us plenty. Dan always said you were good people." Joe shook his head. "Lena, listen. Dan's gone now, and I see you're out here fighting to get by. Come to the Thompson place. You won't have to hustle on the streets, and I'll make sure you and your kid are set. Be my son's nanny, full-time." Joe's pitch made sense. Lena knew him, roots and all. She was someone he could trust with his kid. Plus, widowed and alone, she was in a tight spot. If a bad year hit, she might not even feed her own child. This was a win-win.
Tears wellet ab in Lenas Eis. spilling onto the dusty ground.
Joe, thank you. I'll raise that boy like my own, I swear. Joe grinned. Lena, I'm not much older than you. No need to call me sir, or anything fancy. You're family now, how about Big Bro Joe instead? Lena chuckled, warmth creeping into her chest. Joe wasn't some high and mighty landlord like others she'd met. Even with Dan he'd been respectful, always Dan this, Dan that. Now, here he was, treating her the same. She nodded.
Allrecht, Big Bro Joe it is.
So Joe brought Lena and her son Tommy back to the Thompson house. It got Lena off the streets, and her gratitude ran deep. She vowed silently to repay the Thompsons however she could. At first, Granny T wasn't thrilled about Lena's looks. She's a fright, she grumbled. But with no better options, she gave in. Lena settled in, nursing Joe's son, named Jimmy, and keeping him alive. Fate's funny though. Maybe it was guilt, maybe exhaustion, but Joe got sick not long after. He didn't last, passed away within months. Granny T, heartbroken, followed him 6 months later. The Thompsons, a single-line family for 3 generations, couldn't catch a break. With Joe and Granny gone, the house felt empty, and the family's grip on their legacy slipped. Jimmy was barely a year old, too young to hold anything together. Relatives swooped in like vultures, carving up what was left. But Lena wasn't having it. Ugly or not, she had grit. When the cousins showed up, she planted herself in the doorway.
This house ain't fallen yet.
Long as Jimmy's breathing, and I'm here, you're not taking a damn thing. I'll drag this to the county judge if I have to. What right do you have to the Thompson name?
The relative sneered. You're an outsider, Lena. This is family business. Joe's dead. Has stuff's ours now. Lena fired back. Outsider?
I'm Jimmy's nanny, his second mom. You'll have to kill me first. They wavered, unsure. Then Tom, Jimmy's uncle from Tracy's side, stepped up. My nephew's stuff ain't yours to take.
You think the Miller family's got no say?
Back off. With Tom's muscle, the cousins backed down. The Thompson house stayed intact, barely. But without Joe, the family's income dried up. Fields, rentals, all snatched by outsiders over time. Lena couldn't stop it. She was tough, but just one woman. To cut costs, she let go of most staff, maids, handymen, all gone. Only a few loyal old-timers stayed, Sam the butler and a couple others, bound by gratitude to Joe and Granny T. In the front yard, Sam spoke up.
Lena, Jimmy's too little to run this place.
You're his nanny, we'll follow your lead.
We over the Thompsons waiting.
Pay or no pay, we're staying to raise that boy right. The others nodded. They'd all been touched by the family's kindness. Leaving now felt wrong. Lena wiped a tear. Thank you, all of you.
For Jimmy's sake.
Even though the Thompson family had hit rock bottom, Lena stuck to her promise to Joe. She poured everything into raising Jimmy, determined to see him thrive. To get him out of their fading small town, she pushed him hard. School was non-negotiable. You're gonna make something of yourself, she'd say, dreaming he'd earn a college degree and reclaim the family's pride. Time flew. 10 years later, Jimmy was a lanky teenager, sharp as a tack. One day, he came home from the local community college's prep program, tossing his backpack on the couch.
Lena, wer Epsilon can Tommy come with me to school?
He's my best friend. Lena looked at him, her tough love gaze softening for a moment. Tommy was her son, raised alongside Jimmy like a brother.
Tommy ain't cut out for books, Jimmy.
College costs a fortune, and we're stretched thin keeping this house afloat. He's fine helping out here, saves us money. Jimmy opened his mouth to argue, but Lena cut him off with a sharp, enough.
You focus on your studies. What your professor teach you today?
Get to it.
Jimmy shrank back, muttering under high esprit.
Lena was a softie most days, but when it came to his education, she was a drill sergeant. He loved her for it, and feared her a little too. Jimmy trudged off to his room, but Tommy had overheard the whole thing. He'd been lingering outside, back from fixing a fence. At 16, he was sturdy, practical, not a scholar like Jimmy.
Still, it stung.
He stormed in, confronting Lena.
Mom, I'm your real kid.
Why's Jimmy the only one who gets to go to school? Lena didn't snap back.
Skjæsjute door, motioning him upstairs to the attic.
Up there were 3 keepsakes, a photo of Dan, Joe's old pocket knife, and Tracy's locket. Light a candle for your dad and Joe, she said quietly. Tommy did, his frustration simmering. Once the flame flickered, Lena spoke. You know how good Joe was to us, Tommy. Before you were born, we'd have starved without him. Now he and Tracy are gone, but this house, their legacy, it's Jimmy's. Everything we've got left comes from them. Sending you to college too? I can't swing it. I'm no breadwinner, just a mom doing her best. Don't hate me for it. Tommy went quiet, the weight sinking in. He hadn't known the full story. From then on, he dropped the college talk. Even when Jimmy tried sneaking him along to classes, Tommy waved him off. Instead, Jimmy found a workaround, sharing his notes, teaching Tommy on the sly. Tommy soaked it up, using it to keep the Thompson place running smooth. Years rolled by, 20, to be exact. Jimmy went from a scrappy kid to a college grad. First, he aced community college, then transferred to a state university, earning a bachelor's in business. Lena couldn't have been prouder. His success sent ripples through town. Those relatives who'd snatched Thompson land started sweating. By 21, Jimmy was a certified accountant, a title that turned heads. Mr. James Thompson, CPA, they called him. The cousins who'd looted the family's assets panicked, quietly returning deeds they'd borrowed. Jimmy's star was rising, and they didn't want trouble. That same year, Lena arranged a match for him, Wendy Davis, daughter of a local factory owner, Walt Davis. Wendy and Jimmy had been childhood sweethearts, running around the same dusty streets. Walt, impressed by Jimmy's grit, greenlit the marriage. The couple tied the knot, a small-town love story come full circle. Not long after, Jimmy got a wild hair. He was heading to Chicago for the CPA exam's final hurdle, aiming to become a top-tier auditor. 6 months later, he passed with flying colors. The news hit town like a thunderclap. Parades of cars honked through the streets, banners flapping with "Congrats, Jimmy." He rode in on a borrowed convertible, a big red ribbon pinned to his suit, grinning ear to ear. The Thompson house was swarmed, neighbors, officials, everyone wanting a piece of the action.
Sheriff Liam Hayes, a burligi hot-knaun Joe, weitet out front.
Spotting Jimmy's car, he waved off his deputies and strode over, helping Jimmy out.
Well, dam, Jimmy, hero of the hour. Yangan marking US Prut. Jimmy laukhet, shaking Hayes' hand.
Thanks, Sheriff. I've got a spot reserved at O'Hara's pub. Come celebrate with us. He worked the crowd like a pro, thanking every well-wisher. Lena hated the spotlight, so Jimmy kept the party off-site, tasking Tommy with setting up at O'Hara's. Once everyone was settled, he scanned the room, puzzled. Uncle Tom, he called, spotting Tracy's brother.
Where's Lena and Tommy?
Tom frowned. I saw Tommy earlier, but now? No clue. Right then, Wendy rushed up, breathless.
Jimmy, trouble, come quick.
Jimmy followed her back to the house, heart pounding. In the living room, on the old oak table, sat a letter and a familiar keychain. Joe's, the one Jimmy had pawned years back to help Tommy start a side gig.
Wendy's voice shook.
I went looking for Lena and Tommy, they're gone. Sam didn't know either. Just found this. Jimmy's gut twisted as he recognized the keychain.
He tore open the letter, eyes racing over the words. Tears blurred Hayes' vision by the end. Jimmy, my boy, if we're face to face somede, let me call you son.
I had Tommy write this. Thank you for teaching him to read and write behind my back. I knew all along.
Sorry for leaving on your big day.
Seeing you succeed means my job's done.
I promised your dad I'd raise you right. And now you're a star.
It's time for me to step back. Rebuilding the Thompsons is on you now.
Promise Emmanuel be an honest man.
I'm old, slowing you down.
Tommy's got me. We're leaving the house for good. Don't worry about us.
Wendy touched his arm.
Jimmy, when you left for Chicago, Lena started planning this.
She didn't show today. I think she's scared her looks'll drag you down.
She's taken heat for it alte the ears, just for you. Jimmy ripped the letter in half, voice breaking.
A son doesn't ditch his mom for being ugly. Lena's not my birth mom, but she's my mom. Without her, the Thompsons would have crashed long ago, I wouldn't be here, let alone a CPA. I don't care what anyone thinks. I'd trade this title to get her back. Jimmy turned to Wendy, desperation in his eyes. Tell Tommy and Sam to round up everyone, friends, neighbors, whoever. We're finding Lena. Uncle Tom, you too, help me track her down. Wendy hesitated. Jimmy, if she's gone, maybe it's what she wanted. Shouldn't we respect that? What? Jimmy snapped, incredulous. You agree with this? No. Wendy backpedaled. I just mean she's old, and with Tommy looking after her, she'll be okay. But if you want to find her, I'm with you, let's go. She darted off to spread the word. As she left, Sam shuffled over, lowering his voice. Jimmy, I didn't want to say earlier, but I overheard Wendy and Lena arguing a while back. After that, Lena went quiet, then this. Might mean something. Jimmy's jaw tightened, a cold glint in his eyes. Something wasn't adding up. He brushed it off for now, rallying Tom to scour the county. Days later, Tommy tipped him off. Lena was at the old Thompson Cemetery, by Joe and Tracy's graves. Jimmy grabbed his keys and sped over. There she was, Lena weathered and gray, sitting by the headstones with Tommy beside her. Jimmy parked, bolted out, and dropped to his knees in front of her. He bowed his head, pressing it to the ground 3 times. Mom, you're my mom, always will be. CPA or not, I don't care. If you're leaving because of my success, I'll ditch it. Tomorrow I'll call Chicago, tell him to strip my title, I mean it. Lena's voice cracked as tears streamed down. Jimmy, my boy, why put yourself through this? I'm not your real mom. I did what I promised your dad, raised you up. Now I'm just an old bag of bones. Why stick around to drag you down with gossip? Raised by you makes you my mom, Jimmy shot back fierce. If you're not, who is? I'm telling the world today, you're my mother, end of story. Lena saw the fire in his eyes and faltered, her resolve crumbling. Jimmy didn't wait, he nodded to Tommy. Help me get her to O'Hara's. Before they left, he knelt by the graves. Dad, Tracy, Mom, I've made it. You wouldn't want me turning my back on her now. I know you'd back me up. At O'Hara's, the party was still buzzing, folks toasting Jimmy's big win. He marched Lena in, Tommy trailing behind, and climbed onto a table. Listen up, he shouted, voice cutting through the noise. This is Lena Carter, my mom. Raised me, saved me. I don't care what she looks like, she's why I'm here. Anyone's got a problem, take it up with me. The crowd hushed, then erupted in cheers. Word spread fast, hitting Chicago by week's end. The bigwigs up there didn't scoff, they loved it. The CPA board sent a letter. James Thompson, your loyalty and honor reflect the best of us. Filial piety's the root of integrity. They pinned him as a rising star, proof a good son makes a good leader. Jimmy took a job with a top firm soon after, climbing the ranks. The higher he went, the more he leaned on Lena's lessons. Stay honest, serve the people. Turns out, Wendy had a hand in Lena's exit. She'd heard a hotshot exec was visiting, scoping Jimmy for a promotion. Worried Lena's rough appearance would tank his shot, small-town gossip travels fast, she'd pushed Lena to leave. It's for his career, she'd argued. Lena, not wanting to burden Jimmy, agreed. When Jimmy found out, he didn't blow up. He got it, Wendy meant well. Still, he sat her down. Never again, okay? She's family. Wendy nodded, guilt-ridden but relieved. Lena moved back to the Thompson house, and Jimmy made sure she lived out her days in comfort. He handed the property to Tommy, who'd grown into a sharp businessman, flipping rentals, running a hardware store. Jimmy even hooked him up with some starter cash. In Chicago, Jimmy stayed clean, never a whiff of scandal. Folks praised him as the people's accountant, a guy who never forgot his roots. Wendy gave him 5 kids, 3 girls, 2 boys, keeping the Thompson name alive. The Thompson tale became local legend. Don't judge a mom by her looks, they'd say. Dogs don't ditch a broke home. When life's good, you don't forget who got you there. We stand on our parents' shoulders, seeing sights they never did, doesn't mean we shove 'em aside. That's it for our first story, folks. I'm Nancy Thompson, and I hope you enjoyed it. Now on to the second tale. Stick around, it'll hook you from the jump.
Title?
The Carpenter and the Girl, A Debt Repaid. Picture this. It's 1980s Ohio. A guy named Frank Dawson, orphaned young, raised by his grandma. When she passed, he was on his own, begging scraps till a carpenter took him in. Alright folks, that wraps up our first tale. If you liked it, drop a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and share. I'm Nancy Thompson, and I'll see you in the next one. Now buckle up for our second story, The Carpenter and the Girl, A Debt Repaid. It's a classic American yarn, grit, kindness, and a twist you won't see coming. We're heading to 1980s Ohio, where a young guy named Frank Dawson is about to carve out his place in the world. Back in the Reagan years, in a rundown corner of Dayton, Ohio, lived Frank Dawson. He never knew his parents, lost them as a baby. His grandma, Ruth, raised him in a sagging clapboard house on the edge of town. She scraped by on Social Security, feeding him oatmeal and thrift store dreams. When Ruth died, Frank was just 15, he was left solo, a kid with no one. For a while, he bummed around, scrounging for cans and day-old bread. Then one muggy summer day, he crossed paths with Sam Guthrie, a grizzled carpenter with a pickup full of tools. Sam saw Frank kicking a rock down Main Street, skinny and lost. "You got hands, kid?"
Sam grunted.
Frank nodded. "Good. Hop in, I'll teach you a trade." Frank latched onto Sam like a lifeline. The old man wasn't soft, worked him hard, barking orders over the buzz of saws, but Frank soaked it up. He learned to plane wood smooth, hammer nails straight, build a chair that wouldn't wobble. In 2 years, he was damn good, better than Sam expected. Sam lived alone in a trailer off Route 35, a bachelor with no kids. Frank heard whispers Sam once had a wife, but she was long gone, nobody knew why, and Sam didn't talk. Frank didn't pry. He figured a guy that's solitary deserved company, so after mastering the trade, he stuck around. Helped Sam with jobs, cooked him dinner, repaying the favor. One night, over beers and a flickering TV, Sam leveled with him. "Frank, you're too good for this. Hanging with me's holding you back. You want to be a real craftsman? Get out there, make your own name. Can't outshine me under my roof." Frank protested, but Sam wouldn't budge. Next morning, he kicked Frank out, gently, with a pat on the back and a toolbox as a parting gift. "Go build something big, kid." Frank hit the ground running. Armed with Sam's lessons and a knack for wood, he started small, fixing porches, crafting tables for neighbors. Word spread fast in Dayton. Soon, he was the go-to guy for custom work. Rich folks in Oakwood hired him for oak cabinets. The county tapped him for courthouse benches. Even churches called him to mend pews or build altars. He didn't play favorites, though. Bigwigs paid full price, but if a broke family needed a bed frame, Frank showed up with scrap lumber and charged nothing. "Can't sleep on the floor," he'd say, shrugging off their thanks. His rep grew. Frank Dawson, the carpenter with a heart. Only hitch? At 30, he was still single. Too busy swinging a hammer, he'd missed the dating boat. Younger girls thought him too old. Women his age were often widows with baggage. Frank didn't mind much, he had his work. One chilly fall evening, Frank was trudging home from a job at a banker's mansion, hands raw from sanding. Cutting through downtown, he spotted a commotion, a crowd milling around something on the sidewalk. Curious, he elbowed in. An old woman lay there, clutching her leg. "What's wrong, ma'am?" Frank asked, kneeling. "Tripped on a crack," she groaned. "Legs busted, can't get up." "Where's home?" "I'll get you there," he offered. She shook her head, dazed. "Can't remember. Don't know." The onlookers shrugged, nobody recognized her. One guy muttered, "She's probably senile. Leave her." Frank frowned. "No way. Come on, ma'am, you're staying with me till we figure this out." He scooped her up, light as a feather, and carried her to his duplex a few blocks away. At home, Frank set her on his couch, tossing a blanket over her. "Rest up. I'll heat some soup." He rummaged through his pantry. Campbell's chicken noodle, good enough. After she ate, he said, "I'm grabbing a doctor to check that leg. Hang tight." She nodded weakly. Frank tracked down Doc Miller, a local chiropractor who owed him a favor for fixing his office desk. Miller poked at her leg. "Hairline fracture, nothing crazy." Some painkillers and a month off her feet, she'll be fine. Might limp a bit after, though. Frank thanked him, hit the pharmacy for meds, and cooked him up with a glass of water. With her stuck there, he shifted his work home, building shelves in the garage, keeping an eye on her. A month later, she was hobbling around, cane in hand. "Frank," she said one day, "you're a good kid. Thanks for taking me in, fixing me up. But I'm a burden, I can't stay forever." "Go where?" Frank countered. "You don't even know your address. Stay here, till you remember." "Norrus." She fidgeted. "I didn't birth you, Frank. I'm no mom, just a stray. Can't expect you to feed me forever." Frank grinned. "Look, I'm alone too, no folks since I was a kid. How about you be my mom?" "I'd like that. Call me son, I'll call you mom." "Deal." Her eyes lit up, crinkling with a smile. "Well shoot, that's more than I deserve. Must have done something right in a past life to land a boy like you. All right, son, come here." "Mom." Frank hollered, half laughing, half choked up. He'd watched other kids with parents his whole life, aching for it. Now at 30, he had a mom cranky limping but his. She hugged him, and he said, "Let's celebrate. I'll fire up the stove, how about some mac and cheese?" "Help me stir," she chuckled. Soon, they were dishing out a gooey bowl, an egg cracked in for extra flavor. Frank took a bite. "Mom, this is the best. You're cooking every day now, right?" "Long as you want, son," she said. Frank beamed. Having a mom felt damn good. The next morning, Frank headed to a ritzy suburb to build a deck for a lawyer's family. Job done, he swung by a fabric store downtown. His new mom, he'd started calling her that without a second thought, needed something fresh. Her clothes were threadbare, patched too many times. He picked out a sturdy denim bolt, paid up, and stepped into the crisp October air. Heading home through a quiet alley, he heard a frantic shout. A young woman bolted toward him, wild-eyed. "Hey, mister, help me. They're after me." Before he could blink, she ducked behind him. Two burly guys rounded the corner, huffing. "You see a girl run through?" One growled, fists clenched. Frank kept cool. "You mean the one in the white jacket? She went that way." He jerked a thumb toward the opposite street. The goons nodded and took off. Once they were gone, he turned. "Coast's clear, come out." She crept from behind a dumpster, trembling. "Thank you, you saved my life." "What's going on? Why are they chasing you?" Frank asked, sizing her up. She was young, early 20s, maybe, hair tangled, clothes ripped. "It's a long story," she sighed. "Name's Tammy Holt. Grew up with just my mom, never met my dad. She worked as a maid for some rich jerk, scrubbing floors to keep us fed. The guy got handsy, tried to force her. She grabbed me and ran. We bounced around after that, homeless half the time. Then she sold me to a shady bar downtown. They wanted me to, entertain. I wouldn't, so they beat me. I just broke out, and they caught wind. Those guys were hauling me back." Frank's gut twisted. "So you've got nowhere to go?" Tammy shook her head. "I did once, a crummy apartment. But I can't go back alone. They'll find me." He thought fast. "There's a big estate in town, Walt Jenkins' place. I've done work for him. He's solid. You could crash there, work for him, somewhere safe. Those creeps won't dare show up at his door. Sound good?" Her face lit up. "Yeah, anything's better than this. Thank you, what's your name?" "Frank Dawson. Just call me Frank." "Frank, you're a godsend," Tammy said, clutching his arm. He waved it off. "Come on, I'll take you there now." Walt Jenkins was a local big shot, owned a car dealership and a sprawling house on the west side. Frank had built his gazebo a couple years back, and Walt liked his work. "Anything you need, Frankie," he'd said, slapping his back. Walt was fair, too, treated his staff decent, no funny business. They trudged up to the Jenkins estate, leaves crunching underfoot. Frank knocked, and Walt answered, all grins. "Frank Dawson. What brings you?" "Got a favor to ask, Walt. This is Tammy, she's in a bind." Ran from some rough folks chasing her down. Needs a job, a place to stay. You got anything? Walt rubbed his chin. Well, my daughter Cindy's been griping about needing help. Made quit last week. Tammy can start there. No problem. He waved at his butler. Pete set her up. Pete led Tammy off to Cindy's wing. Walt motioned Frank inside. Sit, have a coffee. What's her story? She got nabbed by some dive bar pimps, Frank explained, sipping black brew. Escaped, but they're after her. I ran 'em off. If they come sniffing around, tell 'em I bailed her out, my tab. She kin to you? Walt asked. Nah, just crossed paths. Felt right to help. Walt chuckled. You're a softy, Frank, a good softy. Don't worry about the bar creeps. I'll handle 'em. My name carries weight. Thanks, Walt, Frank said, standing. Gotta run, Mom's waiting. Back home, Frank pulled out the denim. Hey Mom, got you some fabric, new jeans or a jacket, whatever you want. Your stuff's falling apart. She swatted his arm. Frank, you're crazy. You don't splurge on yourself, still wearing that ratty flannel, but you buy me this? I don't even leave the house much. You're the one out there, covered in sawdust. Save it for you. Mom, I'm a carpenter, my clothes are gonna get trashed. You wear it. I've got time, I'll dress fancy when I retire. He grinned, dodging her protests. Next day, Walt sent word, his mansion needed repairs. Doors, windows, the works, the note read. Come when you can. Frank told Mom, gonna be gone a bit, big job. You okay here? Go on son, she said, shooing him. I'll manage. Come back soon. Frank rolled up to Walt's place in his beat-up Ford, toolbox rattling. Pete the butler walked him through. Every door and window needed a tune-up. 10 days, tops, Pete estimated. Walt chimed in, whatever you need, wood, nails, Pete'll grab it. Pays top rate, like always. Materials are fine, Frank said. Pays whatever you think's fair, helping you out's enough. Walt scowled. No charity, Frank. Work's work, favors are favors. You're getting paid, end of story. Frank shrugged, letting it go. Day 3, he was fixing a window in Cindy's room when Tammy popped in. Frank. You're here. Yep, sprucing up Walt's place, he said, wiping sweat. You settling in? Love it, she beamed. Walt and Cindy are great. Cindy's like a sister. Pays me $50 a week, too. Hey, your shirt's torn. Come by my room tonight. I'll patch it. Nah, it's fine. Happens all the time, Frank brushed off. Tonight, she insisted. I owe you. All right, after dinner, he caved, chuckling. That evening, Frank knocked on Tammy's door, next to Cindy's quarters. She ushered him in, pouring a mug of instant coffee. How's it here, really? He asked. Perfect, she said. All thanks to you knowing Walt. I don't know how to repay you. No need, just live good, he replied. Sit, she said, pointing to her bed. Let me fix that shirt. Frank plopped down, handing it over. She stitched quick, needle flashing. Mid-stitch, a maid peeked in, and bolted. Minutes later, Cindy burst through, eyes wide. Tammy, what's this? A guy on your bed, Frank Dawson, no less. Tammy blushed. He's my rescuer, Cindy. Saw his shirt was ripped while he fixed your window. Told him to come by, I'm just sewing it up. Frank stood, sheepish. My bad, Cindy. Shouldn't have sat here. I'll head out. Hold up, Cindy said. You're both good folks, I know that. But this house runs on gossip. It's not great for Tammy, me, or Dad's rep. Let's keep it clean, yeah? My fault, Tammy said. Didn't think it through, just wanted to thank him. Won't happen again. Cindy nodded. All good, Tammy. Frank, shirt's done, rest up. She turned to the tattling maid. You, zip it, or you're out. Got me. The maid squeaked, yes ma'am, and scurried off. Despite Cindy's warning, the next day, whispers snaked through the Jenkins estate. Tammy's sneaking guys into her room, the rumor went. Some stranger, late at night, caught red-handed. By noon, it had morphed into the maid's boyfriends crashing with her. Cindy was livid. She hauled in the maid who'd blabbed. "Didn't I tell you to shut it? What's this I'm hearing?" The girl quaked. "I swear, Miss Cindy, it wasn't me. I didn't say a word." Cindy didn't buy it. "Pack your bags, you're done." The maid slunk off, fired on the spot. Frank caught wind of the mess and felt rotten. He'd stirred up trouble without meaning to. After finishing a doorframe, he tracked down Walt in his study. "Hey Walt, sorry about this. Tammy was just fixing my shirt, nothing shady. I sat on her bed like an idiot, and now it's a circus. My fault." Walt waved it off, puffing a cigar. "Relax, Frank.
Big house, big mouse. Kennst doppite don't sweetite."
He paused, eyeing Frank. "But, you know, you're single. Tammy's single. She's not hitched, and you're a catch. How about it? I could play matchmaker." Frank blinked, caught off guard.
"Walt, I'm 30. She's barely 20.
"I helped her out, sure, but she's just grateful. Pushing this might make her feel trapped."
I die rata not."
"You're overthinking it," Walt said, leaning back. "You haven't even asked her."
"How do you know she's not into you?"
"She risked the gossip to stitch your shirt. Means something. Let me have Cindy feel her out tomorrow."
"No pressure."
Frank scratched his neck. "All right, if you're set on it, thanks, Walt."
"Just, don't push here."
"Don't thank me yet," Walt grinned. "Might not work. Either way, you're a good guy. I'll take the credit if it does." Next morning, Cindy cornered Tammy in the kitchen, pouring coffee. "So, what's your take on Frank Dawson?" Tammy frowned, stirring sugar in. "He's great, saved my life."
"Why?"
Cindy smirked. "If he asked you to marry him, would you say yes?" Tammy nearly dropped her mug.
"Cindy, don't tease me. I'm aber runaway. Frank's way out of my league. No way he'd want me."
"Hold up," Cindy said, serious now. "You were forced into that mess, not your choice. You fought it, stayed clean.
Don't sell yourself short."
Answer me straight, if Frank proposed, would you?" Tammy blushed, hesitating.
"Yeah, I would." "That's all I need," Cindy said, heading out. "I'll tell Dad to ask Frank."
"Sit tight." Tammy's heart thumped. Did Frank even see her that way? She paced, nerves jangling. Soon, Cindy was back. "Good news. Frank says if you're willing, he's in." Tammy's face went red. "Cindy, you're kidding. I need to wash dishes or something." She bolted to the sink, splashing water to hide her grin.
"Cindy Laukhet.
"Better get used to it. Soon you'll be washing his socks instead of my cups." By afternoon, the estate buzzed again, this time with cheers.
"Tammy's marrying the carpenter."
Staff clapped her on the back. Even Pete the butler cracked a rare smile. Walt called Frank over that evening. "Finish my windows, pick a date, and take her home. You're 30, man. Should have settled down years ago. Here's the deal. Tammy's got no folks, so I'm stepping in."
"Il's rose wedding. Call her my girl for the day."
Frank shook his hand.
"Walt, you're too good to us. I over you big."
That night, Frank swung by Tammy's room again. "You sure about this, Tammy?"
"Marrying me."
She nodded, shy but firm.
"Frank, you're my hero. Savet me when you had nothing.
"Your character's gold.
I'd be lucky to marry you."
"If you're willing, I'm all in." "Good enough for me," Frank said. "But two things. One, I've got Mom. She's got a bad leg, needs looking after. You okay with that? Two, my old mentor, Sam. He's alone too. I want to bring him home, take care of him."
"You up for it?"
Tammy didn't flinch.
"Your mom's my mom now."
"Sam's like a dad if he raised you. I'll do my best for both. Count on it." "You're 1 in a million, Tammy," Frank said, relieved. "We're set then." Next day, Frank ducked home during a break. "Mom, big news, I'm getting hitched. Girl named Tammy, works at Walt's."
"Sweetest tea come."
Mom's jaw dropped, then split into a grin. "Well, I'll be." Finally, something to do around here. I'm making the cake. 2 weeks later, the wedding hit. Walt decked out the estate, red streamers, a giant congratulations banner over the gate. Firecrackers popped as a rented limo rolled Tammy in from town. Her dowry, some clothes and a sewing kit, came in shiny suitcases, courtesy of Walt. Folks gawked, thinking Walt's daughter was tying the knot. Nah, just a maid, someone clarified, and jaws hit the floor.
Wat lak, she must we von the Karma-Lotterie.
The limo swung back to Frank's duplex, now spruced up with a fresh coat of paint. They said their I-dose in the backyard, rings swapped, and spent a giddy night as newlyweds. Morning after, Frank and Tammy shuffled out to Mom's room, bleary-eyed but happy. "Mom, meet your daughter-in-law," Frank said. Tammy looked up. Mom froze. Then, in unison, Tammy. "Mom." They collided in a sobbing hug, tears soaking their shirts. Frank stood there, dumbfounded. Turns out, Tammy was Mom's long-lost daughter. Back when Mom's head wasn't right, years of scrambling after Ruth died, she'd lost Tammy in a crowd. Tammy searched, but fate split them. Then came the trafficking nightmare. Now, by some wild twist, Frank had married his own stepsister, except she wasn't, not by blood. Mom had adopted him. Tammy was her real kid.
Frank schuk heies het, Lauking trug se Schock. Guess we rea family twisse over now.
Still reeling, Frank had another plan.
I'm fetching Sam, my mentor.
We'll bring him here, look after him too. Maybe he and Mom hit it off, complete the set. Tammy wiped her eyes. Go get him, Frank. Hurry. 2 weeks later, Frank rolled back with Sam in tow, grizzled and grumbling but curious. They walked in, and Sam spotted Mom. His jaw dropped, eyes bugged, and he keeled over, out cold.
Sam.
Frank yelled, shaking him. Mom waved it off. He's fine, just shocked. He'll come to. She knelt, fanning him.
Sure enug, Sam blinkt avake, starring.
Sue? That you? Sam Guthrie, you old dog, Mom, Sue snapped. Who else? You ditched me years ago, I never tracked you down. Tammy gasped. He's my dad.
Sam rubbet heies Eis, still darzet on Frank's living room floor.
Sue, I can't believe it. And you, he looked at Tammy, piecing it together.
Jure my girl.
Tammy nodded, tears brimming. Dad. She dropped to her knees, hugging him tight.
Frank stot back, jav slack. Sam, what's going on? Wer Epsilon de Juli her?
Sam sighed, hauling himself up with Frank's help.
Allricht, Keat. Here is a story.
Sue was my wife. I was a nobody back then, a drifter. Her folks were big shots, owned half the county. They took me in as a son-in-law, but treated me like dirt. Couldn't stand it, pride got me.
I valket out. Svore I die meg so meeting of myself before I came back.
Didn't know Sue was pregnant. Sue crossed her arms, voice sharp. After you left, my family tanked, lost everything in a bad deal. I took Tammy and hit the road. Couldn't keep it together, my head went fuzzy.
Lost her von de in a Kraut. Never Vorgabe myself.
Tammy grabbed Sam's hand. Dad, I looked for you, Mom too. Then I got snatched up, sold off. Never thought I'd see either of you again. She turned to Frank, half laughing through sobs. And you brought us back together.
Frank grint, that's it.
Guess I'm the glue here. Mom, Dad, Tammy, we're a family now, no splitting up again. Next day, the four of them piled into Frank's truck and headed to Walt Jenkins' place. Time to say thanks. They marched up to the estate, Sam hobbling a bit, Sue leaning on her cane.
Wald met door, eyebrows shooting up. Frank, what's his crew? Frank klept Walds Schulter.
Walt, you made this happen. Tammy's my wife now, turns out she's Sue's daughter, and Sam's her dad. You gave her a job, threw us a wedding, and now we're whole. Couldn't have done it without you. Sam stepped up, gruff but earnest.
Yeah, thanks, Jenkins.
You took Tammy in like she was yours. We're kin now, me and Sue owe you for that.
Wald laukhet, clapping Sam back.
Well, hell, I didn't plan a family reunion, but I'll take it.
Jure all welcome here anytime.
In-laws by proxy, right? Damn right, Sue said, smirking. We're a package deal now. A year later, Tammy gave birth, twins, no less. A boy, Frankie Jr., and a girl, Susie, named for her folks. The duplex got crowded fast, but Frank didn't mind. He built an extra room himself, hammering late into the night while Sam and Sue babysat. Sam and Sue didn't remarry, too stubborn both of them, but they stuck together, bickering like old times. Frank kept carpentry rolling, taking bigger jobs now that he had mouths to feed. Tammy pitched in, sewing curtains and clothes for extra cash. Walt sent work their way whenever he could, loyal to the end.
Ze Dawson name Greyrouts in deten.
Frankie Jr. and Susie toddled around, giggling as Sam taught him to stack blocks, Sue stirring soup in the background. Frank and Tammy watched, marveling at the life they'd stitched from scraps. And that's the tale, folks. Frank Dawson, the carpenter who built more than furniture. A guy with nothing who found everything, a mom, a wife, a dad, and kids to carry it on. If you liked this one, let me know below. Subscribe, share, all that jazz.
I'm Nancy Thompson, spinning stories from the heart of America. Next time, we'll dich into another yarn. So meeting wild, so meeting true. See you soon.